Hey, everybody. We are back. A spontaneous no fear podcast with a bunch of friends of mine that I called together with zero notice. And it basically wanted to talk about the insanity that's going on in America and around the world, specifically, inspired by the recent horrific events in Florida. And and these are going to be back to back. We just got off a call with 5 active duty cops where we talked about Second Amendment, fear, training, SR, school resource officers, and why in the world would you stand outside? Now we learned that there were 4 cops, guns drawn behind their cars. And guys, we got pretty deep into stuff. Some of the stuff that was discussed, of course, is what is their policy? If you've been trained like, hey, it's 6 men, you don't go in unless you got a certain stack and all that. And I was like, I brought up a training event I did about 15, 20 years ago in Dallas for a SWAT team where I set up a force-on-force exercise with a bunch of role players in our high gear suit, simunition and props, but everyone had to go in solo. And at the beginning of the event, like all of these professional SWAT cops, they did not want to go in solo. They were like, well, we wouldn't do that. I go, well, no, you're doing it today because I'm fucking running the drill. And they were like, yeah, but that's not how we would work. I said, let me ask you this. If your team was 20 minutes away and there were terrorists in your house about to murder your family and you heard them screaming, would you wait for your team? They were like, fuck no. I said, okay, that's your scenario. I gave them something to think about that made them go, you know what? Screw policy. I need to go do something because, and I know we're not allowed to use the word man anymore. I think that's being taken. Did you guys hear that on the internet? Like, we're not allowed to use the word man. So please refrain from that. I am gender fluid and I identify as a chameleon. I used that joke on the last one there. So, nobody laughed either then. So I'm going to introduce everybody on the call. We've got Ben Hollins, who's a retired police officer. He was a cop in the United Kingdom where they don't have guns. The police officers aren't armed except for armed response units. He then was a cop in Canada, recently retired, and teaches self-defense and martial arts full time. Ben, you can say hi so we can hear your accent.
Hi, how you doing?
Could you do like some famous British character before we get into the show?
Okay. Oh, Mr. Blauer, you are just so damn sexy, baby. Yeah.
Okay, that's not bad. We've got my buddy Aaron Giannetti, who I've actually had the pleasure of co-teaching something that is very relevant. We co-taught a active killer course and have discussed a lot of that. And Aaron recently released a book. Aaron, tell them about the book real quick and introduce yourself.
Thanks for having me on. Aaron Giannetti released a book titled How to Survive an Active Killer. Came out in December. It's been doing pretty well as far as spread goes, but essentially just looking at everything front to back, all the possibilities, all things go into it. But it's set around kind of what you're talking about, which is individual mindset as opposed to group setting, group response, what a lot of people do. And it's geared mainly towards civilians actually taking that action. So the people that are, boots on ground in the moment that it actually happens.
Right. And I made the comment at the end of the last call because we had all these first responders on the call, reminding them that they were probably the third responder, that the first responder is the person who goes, holy fuck, that guy's got a gun or a knife or somebody's trying to attack me. And then the second responders are the people beside you deciding, am I going to stay deer in headlights? Am I going to attack? Am I going to run? And then the third responder is probably, somebody who was called to the scene and trying to intervene. Next on this call is an old friend of mine, not old as in how many years he's been on the planet, although he is old like me, but an old friend of mine, like for about 10 years now, is John Hackelman, who is a legendary Kempo instructor and MMA fighter. There's a lot of very, very interesting opinions on personal self-defense, Second Amendment, and all sorts of stuff. You got to follow him online. John, say hi and add anything you want to that intro.
Hey, pleasure to be here. Can't wait to get started on this discussion, and I'm ready.
Nice. And we've also got my buddy Mickey, who's a firearms instructor. Mickey, you're in one of the. You're from Chicago, which of course has the strictest gun laws in the country. Some of them, and some of the most crazy violence. So I specifically invited you on the show because you're not one of the, you know, tactical instructors who only teach, military law enforcement. You're really out there as, lifelong martial artists. You've taken the empty hand skills and made that proverbial extend the firearm and extension of those personal skills. And I wanted you on here, because you do the hand-to-hand stuff on a personal level, but you also teach the concealed carry and stuff. And you're in the Chicagoland area. So like some of that stuff I think is really relevant. Almost everyone else here, we all shoot and we all have guns, but you're the only firearms instructor on here, which is specifically why I wanted you, even though, Aaron, you don't teach, you just train personally for.
No, I teach. I don't teach just because how busy we've been with the other programs that are a little more pressing
Right.
for us. But,
Right.
I taught, I've been teaching for 6-7 years. But
Okay.
no, not as much as I used to. A lot of private training lately.
Okay, cool. And I'm the only guy here. You can't see this, folks, but maybe I'll do a screenshot. I'm the only one here that can't grow a beard. Just want to point that out. My wife's also in the room, and she will heckle and at some point jump in and hijack the call. So I'm going to just jump in here with something. I was going to play a recording of Ben Shapiro talking about how horrified he was that, like you have people screaming, you got to give up your guns. And then he's saying, so, you got to give up your guns and then the police will protect you. And then he's saying, well, wait a minute, but there were 4 police officers who were armed who didn't protect anybody and they stayed outside. It was a really impassioned speech, but I think that's, it's got a zillion views on it. Everyone's seen it. Maybe I'll play it at the beginning of the show, but, who wants to jump in just like emote a little bit about specifically that moment of why would a cop make that 4 cops stay behind their vehicle? And what I understand is that it was another county that actually made entry and these guys didn't even go in. Who wants to just take the mic and rant on that for a moment? Anybody, go for it. Mickey.
Well, I think every one of us, based on our background and our training, would attest to what I'm about to say. Those people, and I don't want a Monday morning quarterback not being there, but what we do know, those folks probably never trained themselves mentally for that day. They never said, if A, B, and C happens, here will be my response to that. They didn't play that out. Gentlemen I know that come from high levels of special operations play out the most minute details hundreds of times, thousands of times, laying in their bunk, sitting on a transport vehicle, just like a fighter. I'm sure John would attest to this. You play those scenarios out over and over and over again so that the response becomes instantaneous. I have students occasionally that are cops that say, thanks for passing on that skill, but I don't think I could actually shoot somebody. What?
Yeah.
That's insane. What are we practicing for if you haven't even gone over
right
mental gyrations of being able to deploy or employ a tool like that?
Yeah, that's a huge point and something that we always bring up on the mental side of the training is have you considered that this is a choiceless choice? Because that rapist, murderer, mugger, whatever, has no qualms. They're an asocial motherfucker. They have no qualms to do what they're about to do to you, and you need to get back. You need to get back in that. John, go for it. I know you want to say something to this.
Yeah, it's the mindset of a lot of people. I'm a registered nurse, and I used to teach nursing self-defense to nurses, mainly that work in the prison or the mental health or even like South Central LA. a lot of nurses say, I could never hit. I'm trained to heal. I could never hurt anyone. I said, okay, then let's pretend this. What if it was somebody was beating the living shit out of your child? Could you jump in then? That's the kind of stuff you got to think about. And when people, and not only the mindset, people think, well, there's going to be a cop right there. Now we see there might be a cop that might not even jump in, but I'm still going to say that most cops would jump in, and most cops are going to be the first ones to jump in. But even if they are willing to, just the time alone. I mean, if I call a cop from where I live and there was somebody breaking into my house and I didn't want to carry a gun because I thought it was unethical and I didn't believe in the Second Amendment. So I just said, I'll just call a cop. Average response time, 28 minutes from the cop to my house. And I've actually tested this once because there was a guy around my property and I didn't know what he was doing. And he looked like he had a weapon. So I called 911. I got my gun. I called 911 and I said, hey, there's a guy on my property with a gun. I don't know what he wants to do. I timed it. It was actually 28 minutes. And by then I already had the guy on the ground and he had his head. He had no gun. He was just some guy that was wandering around, didn't know where he was, but I wasn't going to take any chance. But my point was, in 28 minutes, by the time the cops could have got there, I could have been shot 7,500 times. I could have been hit with a 20-pound sledgehammer 950 times by the time the cops got there. So even in the city where the response time is a little better, but sometimes it's right around double digits, maybe 9 or 10, you can get stabbed a hell of a lot of times in 9 minutes.
Well, we know, I always make the joke that, like, if you're holding your phone and texting, so you have no situational awareness and somebody attacks you, even while you're holding your phone, you still don't even have time to dial 911 in a sudden attack. But in terms of the active killer scenario, we know that these things are done in 2 to 4 or 5 minutes, and the average response time could be 5 or 6 minutes. And most of these fuckers, shoot themselves as soon as they're confronted or charged. And you brought this up, a minute ago, Mickey, and like this, the mental prep is everything. And that's the big thing that I always harp on is if you're one of our maxims, if you're scared shitless, unconscious, or dead, you're not going to do the next move you thought you were going to do. People need to think about the consequences of inaction and what the penalty of inaction is, and they got to think about that in advance of the fight. Let's go, Ben or Aaron. Anything you want to add just to this topic of like the mindset piece of these guys outside not making entry?
Yeah, I mean, I always, as a civilian, I always hate making comments on police in any form or fashion. I don't know the job. I've never been there. I don't know the psychology completely into it. But I do know, echoing off of what Mickey was talking about and even what John was getting into, it's the mental aspect, I think, in anything. And again, it's beating a dead horse with you around, Tony, but it's no matter what you do, if you never put yourself in that place, what's the context of what you're doing with your training? What's the context of how you're going to apply it in any way, shape, or form? I mean, when I was actively teaching firearms courses a little bit more, first thing we told people was, you do realize that you own a gun to kill a human, right? Like, you've made peace with that aspect. Well, no, it's for better protection. It's to feel safer. Well, that's not really how it works. Like, do you understand the actual, emotional and psychological components to it? And it's lacking. And like Mickey kind of said, it's pretty apparent that they weren't really putting the time in and the training, at least the ones that were there when they actually showed up, which is unfortunate.
It's interesting because fear is contagious and so is courage. So you got somebody shitting in his pants waiting to, and I'm just assuming that, listen, he might have been one of these sticklers for policy. He might have also been one of the guys that just said, like, I'm not going in there to get killed. I'm retiring next year. I mean, who the hell knows? And one of the things that was brought up in the last call is where it was, I forget which one of the when the guy said, hey, the Scott Peterson event is going to change training. Nobody wants to be Scott Peterson, right? And so,
one T.
What's that?
With one T or T.
Right.
Because there's two bad ones, right? One has one T, one has two.
God. Ben, you wanted to say something there.
Yeah, I was just, one of the things that was going through my mind when I first heard about this is the fact that is it also something to do with the mentality from their administrators, from their chiefs? Because at the moment, one of the biggest things which is hurting a lot of law enforcement is our administration saying, "Oh, we've got to dumb down all of our force. We've got to de-escalate before we look at using force." And they don't even really know what de-escalation is. And it's been, when Perth came out with their report of de-escalation, they went to Scotland and looked at them doing their cell extraction. And they said they did it with no guns, they did it everything, but that's in training. Okay, they didn't go out onto the streets and see what the real cops have to do, every night dealing with people. But what they do come up with all the time is this huge thing about, hey, let's talk someone down. Or actually, at the moment, we're going to suspend that of you running in there because we need to now formulate a plan of how better to de-escalate this. And I think that may have some bearing on this, and we may never know.
I'll tell you this. I got a private message from one of my sources. I got a private message from a cop who didn't give me permission to reveal his name or whatever, but he told me that in Broward County, that the schools all get funding from the state, and one of the metrics is their crime rate, right? And that they had started just letting people go for different crimes, because if they report them, it impacted how much money they got. And so there's this whole corruption there, where and that, I mean, that's all the osmosis of that just filtering through. I mean, look at, without getting into it, because it's been played out to death on social media, but the FBI was called. Cops were called 30 something times to the guy's house. The mother said, hey, there's something wrong with my kid, take his guns or whatever. And then still something happens. I want to throw a little curve in here. It may not be a curve. It's not going to be a curve for you guys, but part of the problem is people are fucking dicks. People are douchebags. I mean, the disrespect for parents, the disrespect for school teachers, the disrespect for cops, it's insane. So, obviously it's if your kid is an asshole, it's a good chance it's your fault, right? I remember reading years ago this amazing quote, no such thing as illegitimate children, only illegitimate parents. And that had a huge impact on me when I decided to raise my kid by myself when he was just a month old. And it's like, what kind of dad am I going to be? Never wanted him to look at me and look in my face and go, that guy's a fucking liar. He bullshitted me. Right. And so, I don't know what the solution is. Like, how do you fix parenting and how do you go back in time? Because what we're going to have is we're going to have, like, let's say somebody could immediately institute parenting where we were teaching people about courtesy, respect, holding doors, yes ma'am, no ma'am, respect your elders and all that stuff. We still have like we got to go through this 20-year weaning period, right? How do we fix that? But to me, that's the biggest. I mean, yeah, there's mental health, there's too many guns, easy access, blah blah blah, but there's no boundaries anymore. People fucking look at all the videos going around where teachers are fighting, physically fighting with their students, and everyone's standing around there with their smartphone filming it. Like, what the fuck?
Can I interject something?
Of course.
So the thing that you're talking about is probably 25% of what comes out of my mouth as people discuss the problem we're talking about. So we could put to John's point, the proximity or time it takes for help to arrive, any calamity, fire, cardiac arrest, a car crash, or some type of violence. There's some type of time that's required. So I've got a guy that's telling me today he runs a large security company. He wants to lobby to have money put together to fund a couple of armed security people in the schools. I said, that's great, man. You got a 5,000-6,000 square foot building, couple people, no problem. My kid's high school is like 200,000 square feet. It's like a mall. You could put
Right.
10 SF soldiers in there, and they only can cover 1,000 square feet, 500 square feet. So just the proximity of what it takes to deal with those things, it doesn't work. So the argument, and I'm getting to it in a roundabout way, is we need to be responsible for our own persons, our own children, which comes back to the parenting thing. I had a guy scream at me today and tell me I was a racist because I brought up the argument of inner city crime. Like my city, I don't live in Chicago, I'm out in the country. It's, I think last year, I looked it up last night, I think there were 1,732 people shot. What the
Jesus.
fuck? You know, what the fuck? And 80% of gun crime in the U.S. is gang related. People don't like hearing those things because now it starts turning into like a socioeconomic thing. But who the fuck is raising children? Can I say who the fuck?
Too late.
Okay.
You already
Who
did.
the fuck is raising children and not stopping their kids from fighting in the streets? Last time you and I spoke, Tony, I told you about the 2 young people I knew that were murdered from street violence. And that continues to proliferate, and we're talking about something totally different now with these psychos walking into school, different type of criminal, but the response for that acute violence is the same regardless of the motivation. Would we all agree to that?
Yeah, 100%. Let me ask Aaron, because you travel around the country teaching, and it was really an interesting thing. It was how I don't want to open Pandora's box and even go down this, but I had at the course that we did when I had you come as a guest instructor at my camp, there were a couple of cops there that were offended by your presentation, but it was their unconscious bias and filter. It's almost like the arming teacher debate, and what was brought up before was when people are freaking out about arming teachers, they're thinking like, if you give a teacher a gun, like, how are they going to clear this building? How are they going to have any tactical, as opposed to, you've got the football coach who shielded students with his body, right? Willing to die to protect some kids. Imagine if he had a gun at that moment. Right. And what I brought up also is the cops that were hiding behind the car. If that fucker had turned around, come out of the building and started shooting at the car, I guarantee those cops would have tried to light him up. It's that moment of choiceless choice where we've got to do something. So Aaron, what I was going to get at with you is what's interesting about your model. I'm going to say business model, but I want to caveat that with saying that Aaron has been teaching virtually for free for years, trying to get it out there. Hey, cover my expenses. He doesn't have this big, pyramid scheme going. And I really respect that. It's like, hey, cover my expenses and we'll get out there. And yeah, if we can make $1 and a little bit of money, of course. But he came out to my camp, put on an amazing course. We did a private one for my trainers. Ben, you were at that class. Or you weren't at that class. Some other British good-looking guy with a beard. But the model is you're teaching specifically the real first responder. That's the individual there. How do you address? How do you get into this mindset? And then John, I want to bring you in after that because you've been teaching for decades now, and one of the things as a coach to some like world-class MMA guys all the way down to the kid, like how do you get in their head about managing fear to protect yourself? But Aaron, let me ask you first because we're talking about the active killer. How does that get addressed in your class? And remember, we're having fun talking to each other. We know each other, but there's maybe like 1 or 2 people listening to this, maybe 1 or 200, or maybe 1 or 2,000 people listening to this. What can we share with them as far as switching on and just accepting what's going on?
Yeah. The biggest thing that we try to bring in, like if you look at most teaching models for active shooter response, school shootings, things like that, It's usually based around this huge swarming aspect, right? Guy comes through the door and all of a sudden everybody simultaneously throws it and jumps on him. And it's not realistic. It's not realistic from a tactical standpoint unless you're secured in a barricade with plenty of warning and communication and coordination. And it's definitely not realistic to assume that every single person in there is going to be a willing participant in that fight. And to do it the way they generally do it, which is they're actually the first ones getting shot at. So we started really kind of harping on the idea, like you got to understand, like you are legitimately the last line of defense. Like you're responsible for you. You have to understand the psychology behind in the initial moments. You're going to be acting, generally speaking, in your own personal best interest. I'm not teaching you to do that. That's just the way it is. We try to survive. That's how it goes. The farther I get away from it, maybe the better decisions I make or the longer time I have opportunity to make things. But you can't rely on group response. You can't rely on anybody else coming to get there. And that's not an easy pill for people to swallow, because essentially what that does is it tells them that it's their protection and safety is their own responsibility. And most people don't want that. They want to know that the cops are going to come and save them. They want to know that EMS is going to show up and plug their gunshot wounds. They want to know that when they aren't pulling their weight and making money, some financial program is going to take care of them. I mean, we want somebody else to do everything for us. So it's not always an easy conversation in the beginning, but I can say that it's as we get people moving, and especially as we go through some of the scenarios and some of the drills, they start to realize it. First off, they start to realize they're physically capable of a hell of a lot more than they've ever given themselves credit for. But they start to realize that, okay, psychologically, I understand how I can't be sitting around waiting for cops. I can't be sitting around waiting for anybody else. I need to be pulling my own weight. If I'm 30 pounds overweight, then I need to fucking, stop eating Twinkies and drinking beer and start fucking working out, or else I am legitimately cutting the legs off protecting my family. It's a rough conversation to have with people. But I think it was actually you. We were on one of these podcasts or video calls a while ago, and you said, you walk up to any guy, and if he has a daughter, and you said, what would you do if somebody came up and tried to beat shit out of your daughter or rape your dog? And you go, I'd fucking kill him. And you go, you're 50 pounds over fucking weight. You can't climb a flight of stairs. Like, what makes you think you can actually protect them? And that's that pushing that responsibility off. We have this bravado. We think that we can do magic things, but we never put ourselves through it. We think cops are responsible. I mean, even look at the debate. We want to go, okay, fix mental health, that'll fix these problems. Fix gun laws, that'll fix these problems. Nobody's sitting back and going like, well, fuck, maybe I should actually be taking care of myself. Maybe I should be learning, how to fight. Maybe I don't want to carry a gun, but if I'm afraid somebody's going to shoot me with a gun, I sure as shit better know, what it feels like to shoot it, what it smells like, what it sounds like. I better get familiar with it so that I understand those positions. So initially we do get a lot of pushback. It rubs some cops the wrong way. We've had a lot of positive feedback from law enforcement officers. I think the ones that get it, and they understand that it's not because they don't want to be there, most of them. It's because you don't have fucking time to get there. If
Right.
this shit's over, you look at San Bernardino, I mean, law enforcement response time was 3 minutes and 28 seconds, and they were fucking gone. You know what I mean? It's in the initial moments, you have nothing else going. So we're really big on kind of plugging that through people's heads. That doesn't mean that they get it right out of the gate. It doesn't mean that it's an easy conversation. But if I were to walk in and say anything else, I'd be just blatantly fucking lying to these people. And I think as unfortunate as it is to point out, this Florida situation is the prime example of how every fail-safe that we believed was in place to protect our children from it fell through. And so what is that, last line of fucking defense? It's you. You got nothing else. The, early warning signs, expelling him, FBI, police officers before and during, your teachers, all that kind of shit. Your lockdown drill where he thwarted it by pulling a fire alarm. All of that shit failed, and we still don't want to have the conversation about how we might be responsible for our own safety. And it might make sense to teach a 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old kid how to fucking take care of themselves, how to apply a tourniquet. God forbid we show them in the last resort how to fucking fight somebody. So it's not an easy conversation to have, but it's a conversation we fucking need to have, because the reality of it is, I mean, what better example of everything fucking failing and it coming down to the people that were on there? The guy that dove in front and took the bullets, the kid that held the fucking door shut. Like, those are tragic stories, but those are fucking guys that took action. They did shit. And now imagine if we actually tried to prepare and train the entire mass to do that. No, they're not all going to do it, but maybe we go from 10% of people taking action up to 40. That's a big fucking jump.
It's the Flight 93 model, right? Like, hey, let's rock, let's do this. That was an epic
No time.
speech, man. Good job there. My wife just jumped out of her chair, so I'm guessing she's going to hijack the mic and has either question or a comment. And I want to get to John's thoughts after that, unless Jesse uses up all my hard drive space, and the call just crashes. But what do you got, sweetie?
So first of all, I think Aaron, no disrespect to anybody else or any of the cops that we're speaking to, is everybody's talking about the wrong thing. You know, the students that are lying down at the White House for gun control, the liberals that are saying, you know, the cops didn't do anything, and, you know, armed teachers, the SRO wasn't trained, and we're talking about training, but it all comes down to what you said, Aaron, is nobody's talking about taking responsibility for their safety, for their kids, for their protection, for anything else. And even though I wasn't part of the drill that you did when you were here doing the course with Tony, the right after we watched the Columbine video and you did the active shooter drill, and I hate that I bring this up in every friggin' podcast that I'm on, but you know, I had a home invasion at gunpoint, and it's still, that drill affected me so profoundly. It was so realistic, even though there was nothing realistic about it, even though it was so realistic. You know, you had a gun, it didn't have real bullets, you were yelling, but you weren't really mad. And everybody, you do not know, I don't care what you think you don't know what you're going to do until you're in that position. And, you know, I saw, it's insane the things that I'm seeing on the internet, and it's infuriating and sad and scary all at the same time. Now they're selling bulletproof blankets that you can bring to school with you and put on you. It's disturbing and terrifying, and no one's, it's like everybody's like in grade 4 having a fight with each other over the stupid issues, and they're not. Everybody thinks that they're helping, but they're not. You know, everybody fighting about the gun control or arming teachers or putting guns in everybody's hands, training them. It's disturbing. And I said to Tony, and I said on the last podcast, that we're all sort of just to blame. You know, the day after the shooting, I dropped my daughter off at school. There's a cop car parked in the front, and, you know, no teachers were there. There were no protests. There was no nothing. Her campus is completely vulnerable. I mean, if there's 365-degree radius, it's accessible from 357 degrees. And, you know, yeah, there's people always watching and people always with a phone, but I don't know. The kids walking in with their backpacks and their fucking crazy ideals and their fights with their parents at home and their fucking suicidal tendencies and drugs and everything else, they're still, you know, and everybody's still, even still with 17 kids shot dead a week ago, it's already fizzling out on Facebook. The fights are already dying down, and everybody's just going on with their day. You know, the fights with you know, the liberals and the Republicans fighting about gun laws and protests and all that shit, but nobody's doing anything. And it's terrifying because I don't even know what I can do. Of course, I'm going to say this. I feel like I know the right thing to do, but I'm not even doing it. Like, what am I going to do? Not send her to school? I'm going to start homeschooling her. I'm going to go and start a rally at her school and make sure all the parents, but like everyone needs to not send their kids to school until the grounds are surrounded and there's a guard and metal detectors. But
to wrap some of that over, and I had a conversation with with somebody that's actually in the community down there that runs a podcast. I talked to him earlier today, but to kind of bring some of your points kind of to a head, let's be clear. There's nothing wrong with focusing on fixing the issues that came up and doing preventative measures and things like that. There's conversations to be had about everything that goes into it. But the push off is that while all of those conversations are taking place, they're all a Band-Aid in some form or fashion. One of the things I brought up on that podcast was, even if, everybody was up in arms because that HB 219 got shut down in Florida, which was the assault weapons vote. They didn't bother voting on it. And even had that gone into place, it wouldn't have gone into effect until October 1st, 2018. Any firearms that were purchased before the date of it passing wouldn't have had to even start applying or put their applications in for registration until October 1st, 2019. So even if they got what they wanted with that, you put a Band-Aid over it temporarily, you're not solving the problem.
Right.
And it's not even going to go into effect for anywhere from months to a year. And so what it's always going to fall back on is the individual. And that individual responsibility comes down to not just, learning trauma care and going shooting and learning how to fight and learning evacuation routes and all that kind of stuff, but it goes to individual responsibility down home. You can actually make an impact in your fucking community if you took 2 seconds to do it.
Mm-hmm.
You can make an impact in your kids' lives. How many families still actually sit down, for dinner and have fucking conversations and pry and ask questions and actually discipline kids that get out of hand and put them into it. And all that shit can be done. The reason it oftentimes is not is because by accepting that responsibility and doing those things, if it fails, there's only one person, at least in their mind, to blame, and that's them. And the unfortunate reality of it is that's fucking life.
Yeah.
Life's not fair. Shit happens. Even in the context of the active, killer, active shooter drills that we run, I tell people all the time, like, look, there's no yes or no answer. Everybody wants an answer. That's not the way it works. If I'm evacuating that school and I turn a corner and I'm 10 feet from the gunman and I have, let's say 3 choices. One is to run back around the corner. One is to run past him to the nearest exit. And one is to run at the guy. Maybe I have a 30% chance of surviving if I go backwards. Maybe I have a 15% chance of surviving if I run to this other exit. And maybe I have a 12% chance of surviving, running at the gunman. In either case, you can still fucking die. And in either case, you can still fucking live.
Right.
There's no clear-cut answer to any of this. But that comes down to accepting individual responsibility. And that's we don't like that. As a people, we don't like it. Even though we're on here harping about it, I guarantee we can all come up with 5, 6, 10 fucking things that we push off on other areas.
Of course.
It's the way it is. It sucks, but it's true. So there's nothing wrong with having reasonable discussions on what everybody wants. But no matter while we're doing the preventative measure stuff, the shit's still happening right now. And you can actually take action. You can go buy a fucking trauma kit and actually carry it around. You can go learn how to shoot a gun and what a gun sounds like. Because if you ever plan on barricading, fighting back, anything, but you've never heard a gun go off or never been around one, then you don't know what is safe and unsafe about that gun outside of the bullshit you've seen on TV and movies.
Yeah.
You haven't had the experiences. You can't actually have educated conversations on it. You can't properly put yourself in the best possible position. Everybody has a ceiling of potential that they could reach. Everybody does. But we just don't take the steps to do that, and people need to do that. So even if you just went out and took a fucking trauma course, you're 10 steps further than you were before. Go take a trauma course, have a conversation, go punch something, go visit John and have him teach you how to beat the fuck out of people, right? So it's just the way it is.
Let's I want that. I want the conversation now. Let's pretend we're a panel talking to a bunch of people who are fucking scared shitless, because they are. And what you said there was, and what Jesse said is very relevant, is like we're bitching about it, but we drop our kid off at school. I go out and I've got good situational awareness, but I don't have my knife on me. I don't have my gun on me. I don't, because I'm just in fucking Encinitas. So I don't live in Encinitas. That's not my location. I live in San Luis Obispo near John. Oh shit! I just said to John, Liz. John, how do you deal with someone's in your class? You know, I learned how to swim. My mom will never listen to this, so I'm going to tell a story. I was afraid of swimming as a kid. She put me in a rowboat when we were camping, rowed me out to the middle of a lake, and said, "Jump in and swim back. I'm going to row beside you. You're safe. You'll always be like 3 feet away from the boat." I said, "Well, no." I was like maybe 5 or 6 or 7. And in baby talk, I said something like, "Yeah, that's not going to work for me." And she picked me up and threw me in the fucking lake. And I'm a good swimmer. But that's not the way, like if somebody did that today, they'd be arrested, right? You can't, I grew up in the 60s. So John, I know you're old school there. How do you teach people, cause you've got like somebody like back in the days when you and Chuck were doing shit, that was old school. How do you deal with the balance with somebody who goes, "Yeah, I'm going to learn how to fight by fighting," and then somebody who's people hate when I use the term snowflake. I've been getting in shit lately from snowflakes who don't like the term snowflake. But do you get that type of personality who comes in there? They've never been yelled at. They've never been hit. They're in this PC generation. And what do you, as a full-time martial arts self-defense instructor, how do you address overcoming fear of contact and confrontation?
Well, first of all, it's our gym. We started at 3 years old, and that's weird because we started at 3, and my toughest student outside my fighters, because fighting's a hobby for me, but my toughest student that actually he just got his, I think, red belt, and he's no, he just got his black belt. Sorry, he's a pediatrician. He's a pediatrician, and when he spars, it's like he was made to spar. It was like never had to fight before growing up. I mean, it just comes natural for him. He can beat up everyone in the class except for my fighters. Right. And then some people, the first time they even go out to spar, they realize that they can't do it. But you never know. That to me, that's going to be instinctual. So that part's instinctual, but the fight or flight is innate, and that's in us. And so I put it like this. So when the guys like to spar, and I've had guys come up to me, "Man, I don't even like to get hit when I spar. What am I going to do if I ever need it?" I go, when you train right now really hard, get it in your muscle memory, even though that's a weird term, get it in your muscle memory. And if you need it, it'll come out. If you see somebody attacking your daughter, it'll come out. I mean, that shit'll come out. If somebody attacks you and you feel like your fight or flight comes out, you'll go. But if you have to spar, just two guys are like bow and go. Some guys they don't react that way. That they just don't want to do it. But I feel like when it's fight or flight, you're gonna go after it. But then again, there are some, even when the push comes to shove, if it's not on them, they're going to punk out. The pussification of our country is to such a level, unless they're attacking them, or maybe even there's some guys that if their daughters are attacked, they'll probably say, "Hold on, hon, let me call 911 over here." I mean, it's even reached that level. Most guys wouldn't do that, but there still are some. So you're never gonna know, no matter how hard you train them. You can make them tougher, and they can figure out a lot of the levels that they will go, but until they get punched in the face or they see somebody with a knife pulls out a knife, they're not gonna know. They're just not gonna know how they're gonna respond. So I think train them. That's all we can do.
I think the important thing, and if I'm going to extract like a message for any instructors listening to this, is and what's unique about the people that I invited on the call, and there's other people out there, but most people train what I call on the right of the ambush. They don't practice on the left of bang, left of ambush. And what I mean by that is, people say, "Hey, get to the left of bang, left of ambush, get your situational awareness." Okay, everyone good? Okay, get me in a headlock. Let me show you the counter. Okay, tackle me. Let me show you the counter. Okay, stick a gun in my face. And what they don't realize is that you're doing 10,000 reps of the disarm, which means you're doing 10,001 reps letting somebody stick a gun in your face, 10,001 reps letting somebody put the headlock on you. And while that's important to develop the counter skills, the avoidance skills or the interception skills are far more valuable to you. I don't want to do the gun disarm. I want to go, holy shit, is that guy reaching for a gun, and then fucking make a move, way sooner. So John, what you're doing, Aaron, what you're doing, Ben, I know you're doing, Mick, you're doing in your class. What I do is I'm getting people to think about fear management, talk about it in advance so that they can actually ruminate about it, meditate on it while they're sparring, while they're scared, and forcing those conversations to come up where it's my big push, what I've been doing lately, where I say, hey, there's no such thing as no fear. There's only getting to no fear, and we got to spell them differently. It's not N-O fear. It's K-N-O-W fear. If we embrace it, we accept it. It's okay to be afraid, and you can use that fear as a fuel. You just don't want to use it as something that holds you back. John, did you want to add something? Or I know.
I just want to add one more thing. There's that level where you want your guy to be confident, and everybody always says, oh, you have to be confident. But if you show confidence and you can talk everyone down, nobody will ever attack you. But that confidence can't be empty, or it's called you have a false sense of security. You have to have the confidence, and you can get away with a lot of stuff, and you feel better about yourself, you're happier. But your skill level has to be trained to match your confidence, or you're just nothing but an empty shell. So you have to train your guys physically and mentally, both my fighters and my students and my regular students. And those two things have to match, or else you're without the confidence. If you're here skill-wise, you're still going to get the shit beat out of you. And if you're this confident and you can't fight at all, you're going to get the shit beat out of you. You're just going to walk into shit you shouldn't be walking into. So you have to bring your confidence, your skill, your competence has to match your confidence.
I dig it. I know Mickey wanted to say something, but Ben is like chomping at the bit there going, let me go ahead. But Ben, use a British accent this time.
I was going to say, yeah, I want to hear that accent more.
I totally agree with everything that John said about the you got to have the skill base in order to get the come out, because one of the things that you say, Tony, is that you got to have skill specific training and scenario specific training. And I think we let ourselves down on the scenario specific training. About 4.5 years ago, midday in Calgary, we had reports come in, and it came over the radio from an officer who said, yeah, dispatch, I'm having shots being fired at me. And you could literally hear the bullets going past his head. And what it was a guy wanted suicide by cop, but he's in the middle of a housing estate, midday. He's got two pistols, and he's just blamming rounds off towards the officer and blamming rounds off towards people's houses. There was about 10 cops responded to this. How many shots from cops do you reckon was returned? Zero. And they were in direct vicinity reporting that, yeah, he's in front of me 15 yards walking away with his guns in his hand. He's now shot at a building. You could hear the rounds flying back. There was a female officer who had part of her hair taken off by a bullet. That's how close it got to her head. They lost him. He went round into another estate and then killed himself in the cul-de-sac area. So, these are cops that have been trained and have that mindset of, yeah, I can go and deal with this. And not one of them dealt with it.
What do you think that is? Do you think that's just fear, or is that bureaucracy? I don't want to be in the news. I don't want to be fired. I don't want to be.
I think it's a mixture of both, because, a lot of the cops that went to this were young cops. When we looked at and researched afterwards and debriefed the call and everything, there were a lot of the younger cops, and all of our active shooter training at the time was only in a school. So we never did any training outside to address an active shooter out in the middle of a parking lot, or going through a green space or anything. So again, it harps back to that scenario specific training, and a lot of them throttled on that.
It's funny. It's don't get me started on scenario training. I ask, this, Ben, because you train with me, but I ask the question very often, swimming. What's the difference between swimming, dog paddle, in a pool, in a lake off of Scotland, or in the ocean off of the coast of Bermuda, right? And somebody in the class goes, "Oh, Loch Ness Monster, Scotland. Oh, Bermuda Triangle." Yeah. And so, we start to have this scenario where Bermuda Triangle, there's planes went down there. There's boats that are missing. People disappear. Loch Ness monsters. Pool, I can see, people say, "Oh, riptides and sharks in the ocean." And I go, "So what's the answer to the question?" And everyone's talking about the scenario and the danger. And the answer, it's a trick question, is there is no difference. The swimming is the swimming. And so if you're teaching, if Mickey's going, "Hey guys, I'm going to teach you to shoot a target that's shooting back at you," and it doesn't matter if this is in your house, in your garage, in a parking lot, in a school, this is your weapon, this is your grip, these are your sights, this is the threat discrimination, this is what you need to think about. And I think that it's interesting if somebody said, "Well, we'd only ever done school reactions," and that's a huge training failure. And that's why you brought this up, is we do attack specific and scenario specific. Getting out of a headlock is getting out of a headlock, but getting out of a headlock in the octagon or getting out of a headlock in a cave in Afghanistan, the risk and the danger and the scenario is completely different. And you got to start looking at it, but the problem is still the headlock. You still got to deal with the fact that there's an arm around your throat. But the consequences of not taking action early are obviously incredibly different in both scenarios. But Mickey, go ahead. I know you got stuff to say about this.
A few notes down, and I want to go back just briefly. We were talking.
Go for it.
The exposure to these different elements of training, and then I'm gonna tie it together real quick. So Z Durham, Green Beret, 5th Group, that does work with me. He coined a phrase that it's part of our training curriculum. Exposure equals composure. So 2 words
like it.
mean so much. The more you're exposed, the greater your composure. There was a time in my life sitting talking and to you guys on camera would cause my heart to accelerate. I tell students I've spoke before a couple thousand people and almost shit myself due to the adrenaline dump.
Right.
Somebody like my father, who was a pastor and spoke every Sunday, it did that would cause him zero reaction, right? So exposure equals composure. I have many friends in law enforcement. I run the campaigns for a couple sheriffs in our region. We'll help with one, run another. The hiring practices in the United States, and this is going to tie into what Aaron was talking about. The hiring practices in the United States, we've lost the warrior ethos. It's vilified to teach somebody to use violence for righteous reasons. One of you guys said, I'm sorry, I wanted to get this out, so I didn't pay attention as I was writing just who was speaking. Somebody could be possibly causing injury to a loved one, and maybe you just want to call the police instead of doing something. So we've bred out of our society what is innate in most living creatures, which is to fight to survive. So we need to reinstill that. And this is now trickled down into the hiring of policemen. My great grandfather was a Chicago cop, was one of the cops that was there when John Dillinger was shot, which is pretty cool. And he was a drunk, racist Irishman. I mean, and I got to know my great grandfather. But in the context of the time.
Sounds like a cool guy.
He was. It was totally acceptable. He refused to leave his West Side neighborhood when it became a total dirty ghetto. And he sat and screamed racial obscenities off his front porch in his pajamas, smoking cigars, drinking quarts of beer at 10 o'clock in the morning.
And Torino.
Yeah, pretty much. That was pretty much him. But my point is, he was also the kind of guy that would have no problem clubbing somebody with a billy club, and it was accepted. And I'm not suggesting we should go back to a time where cops are using violence. Now we hire people based on their credit reports. We hire people based on their education. I don't give a flying fuck if my local police officer has a history degree or even a degree in something that shows he has some management experience. The purpose of a police officer is to protect the public, number one, and serve them in whatever capacity they can. I don't give a fuck if they're bilingual even. We can deal with those kinds of things if that person does not have the innate ability. And every one of you touched on this. Some people do, some people don't. I have this like 95% rule. I think 95% of people, and this is Mickey's asshole rule, I think 95% of the population is too ignorant and stupid to know they're ignorant and stupid. And I think, and I've based what I'm about to say on experience of life, just watching. If we put 100 people in a room, and maybe it's not even violence, an old lady needs help up out of a chair. Most people aren't going to do shit. And it's not because they're lazy. It's just they don't even want to get involved. Most people just, and that's not, I don't even think that that's something that has changed in history. That's humans. Somebody said to me the other day, we've got all these sheep. Yeah, and we always will. Everybody can't be the shepherd. Everybody can't be the sheepdog, which I hate that term. Everybody's not the stand-up guy. So rather than try to make everybody the stand-up guy, identify who they are, provide them training, quit hiring pussies, quit hiring people based on the fact that the last place they were at said he showed up 5 minutes early, which all that stuff's important, but that doesn't make you fit for the task. My daughter's studying to be a firewoman. She's 17. Her school has a full-time fire academy, which is great. She's 100 pounds. Her biceps are about that big. And we talk about this. Kid, you're going to have other people rely on you possibly to live. And you can't, curl a 10-pound dumbbell. So now she's lifting weights. I digress.
No,
I just wanted to get some of that shit out.
Yeah. No, it's epic. Listen, at the end of the day, there's a lot of good memes about this, but everyone wants the cops to be a certain way until they got to do bad things to bad people, and then it's like, where the fuck were you? And at the end of the day, we need badass motherfuckers. We need people that will.
Jared Reston, there's a perfect example of your quintessential who you want in local police force.
Yeah. No, I don't want a social worker. I want somebody that says, hey, you need to stop doing that now. And I want that person. And it's funny because like I'm the guy that would get up on the bus and let the old lady sit down. I'm I still open the door. When I was in my 30s or 40s, go to visit my father at his office, I would still knock on his door and say, is it okay if I come in? It was the way I was raised. But I think, people have always been like that. And I think I agree with everything you said there, Mickey. Guys, I don't know, Jesse, did you have any interesting questions? I don't want to keep everybody too long. I'd like to throw another thought out here. Just in terms of like, are we the modern equivalent of Rome, like the world right now? Like, is this like the zombie apocalypse? Like, how do we, there's so much wrong going on. The pussification, the disrespect, the did you guys catch that? Jesse's a huge fan of the women uprising and all that stuff, but like there's so much craziness. And now, I mean, everything going on in Europe is like, is this, I'm not Mr. like the sky is falling and all of that, but how do we get out of this fucking spiral?
One person at a time.
Amen.
I mean, it's kind of going back to really what this whole entire thing's been about, but everybody's spending so much time trying to fix the big fucking picture, and we're not taking time to just take care of the shit that's around us. If everybody actually took, time to fix their own family, time to fix shit that's going on in their area, take care of people that need taken care of. Tony, if you got on a bus, I would get up and let you sit.
Wow.
But
you better when I see you next, that beard better be gone, because I'm gonna fucking grab it. That was a senior citizen joke, wasn't it?
Senior citizen joke, yes it was.
Yeah. Well, you can sit on my lap, dude. That was a short joke. Okay.
That was a short joke, but you get the idea. I mean, it's everybody has these grand, we went from, I had a sidebar conversation with some people earlier, but before Facebook took over, you strive to get the attention of the people that were directly around you. It was a local thing, right? You wanted to be the star football player because that's what everybody looked at. You wanted to be the cheerleader because those are two people in there. You wanted to be the cop because locally everybody looked up to you because it was local. We didn't have a reach to, fucking people in Japan immediately. And now all of a sudden everybody wants millions and millions and millions of attention, and we want to fix these big ass fucking problems, and we're all just fighting over it, not doing it the right way. Where if everybody just literally take care of your own shit, like in a legitimate way. And if you're not pulling your own, weight, there needs to be maybe not direct punishment outside of directly getting into it, but we need to stop setting other people up to continue to not do that shit. Again, this whole instance down in Florida, like the third time the cops got called on him, that kid should have got punted. I mean, in some form or fashion, something bad should have happened in that area to make sure that nothing else happened there.
I think there's, if we get the truth out of that, I think there's more to that story and that area there, because it's just some crazy. But even if there isn't, it's true. There's all these epic failures, and people are afraid to, call the FBI about this because they don't want to get in trouble for some racial slur and all. I mean, it's just it all. At the end of the day, I can look at every poor decision somebody makes and connect it directly to their ability or inability to manage their own fear. And it comes back to, at the end of the day, fear influences everything we fucking do. I do want to say this and let all of you have a little closing statement. But Ben and John and Aaron, you guys all have martial arts programs, fitness programs, and it's amazing what you're doing. And we got to get back into that where people are actually physically working out and struggling and sweating and realizing that they can do things on their own, because you manage fear, whether you're doing a CrossFit workout or whether you're grappling or whether you're going to the range and shooting. You're managing fear, and you all four of you embody the type of instructor that I would send my kids to train with, because you talk about the personal, the emotional, the psychological side. You're not like about the tricks. Hey, let me show you a cool move. So I just wanted to throw that out there. But Ben, any closing thoughts?
Just that it's this society today. I think personally we've gone too far, and it's going to take a hell of a lot to get it back in. And it's not helping when you have your own prime minister who says that we can't say mankind anywhere. We've got to say people kind. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
That's crazy. But I'm now an American citizen. Good luck. Okay. So, John, what do you got for us? Closing statements.
I agree with Aaron. And it's one person. I want to try to help one person at a time to try to depussify the American youth. And it's getting, I teach the kids, you hit first in school. Well, I'll get suspended. It's better to be suspended than in a nursing home with a tracheostomy tube, because you didn't hit first. So you're in the coma for the rest of your life. So I think everybody needs to take responsibility for themselves. I know all this shit's going on everywhere, but like in our towns, unless you see it like happening to you, just take care of yourself and your own, and try to teach everyone to be less of a pussy. Never start a fight. Never start a fight, but always throw the first punch. I know that's hard to digest, and most teachers go, no, you don't hit. You wait till you call a teacher. I said, what if the guy's getting punched on the ground? No, he's not allowed to hit back. He needs to call for a teacher. He'll be dead. So, I don't want anybody to start a fight. Never fight over words. Never fight on a challenge. Never fight over an insult. But always throw the first punch, and know for a fact the only way that you can beat that evil, violent person is to be better at violence than they are, right?
I dig it. It was funny because when my son was about 4 years old, I came home from a trip, so single dad, had a nanny, and I come home, it's a Sunday night, come home from seminar, and Marcy says to me, "Hey, Nick got in a fight in school on Friday." I'm like, "Why didn't you tell me on Friday?" Everything was okay. I didn't want to worry you because I knew you were traveling. So I go, "What happened?" She goes, just like some little struggle, but he got his neck's okay, but he kind of got choked. And I was like, "Nick, come here." And he comes down. I'm going, "Hey, dude, what happened in school?" "I don't want to talk about it." "Nick, what happened in school?" "Dad, I don't want to talk about it." "Dude, we're talking about it. What happened?" He says, "Well," and he starts getting really passionate. And John, you're gonna dig this. You just made me think about the story with your little sign off there. He goes, "I was playing with my friends, and we were playing like superhero, and I was Spider-Man, and my friend was Batman, and this other kid from another grade, he's a little bit older. He comes over, he says, 'I want to be Spider-Man,' and he looks at me. He goes, 'But there can only be one Spider-Man,' and I was already Spider-Man." And I'm like trying not to like laugh, right? Because he's furious. And I go, "Okay." And he goes, "So what happened?" He said, "Well, we said, you're not even like in our friend group, so go play with your friends." And we turned around to walk away, and he grabbed my hoodie and yanked me backwards, and it slammed into my choke, and it started choking me. And he's pulling me backwards, and it's choking me. And I go, "Well, what did you do?" And he looks at me and he goes, I go, "No, not what did you do? What did you do?" And he didn't do anything. And I made him, he was like 7 at the time. I said, "Is that your sweatshirt?" We were in his room. He goes, "Yeah." I go, "Put it on." And I freaking did a scenario with him right there, showed him how to spin like a hockey player. So it comes up over his head, and had to headbutt the guy. Like, if you guys visualize it, the shirt's coming around, turn, spin towards a threat, run. And his whole thing is, I'm going to get suspended. I'm going to get out of there. And I said, "Look," and I made him do this. We went through the scenario so he could spin and move. And then I made him memorize this. I said, because he said, "Dad, I'm told that I will get suspended if I fight." And I said, and this was the line I made him memorize to the teacher, to the principal: "If somebody were choking you, would you like permission to protect yourself?" Made him memorize that, right? And I'd always told people, just like you said, John, "Hey, I want a call from the principal, not a call from the hospital. I want a call from the principal, not the hospital." Last story about my kid, a little bit later. Babe, I don't know if I don't think you were around at the time. I've had so many different women besides Jessie, I can't remember. But this is my show. Please stop. This is she's in the background threatening me to sleep on the couch and other things. But we hear some yelling in the room, some crying, and this kid comes running out. "Nick hit me! Nick hit me!" And we're in the kitchen. There's a few moms around, and they're looking at me. I come in there. I go, "What happened?" And Nick says, "This kid grabbed my toy from me." And the mother's like looking at me to reprimand Nick, like for hitting him. And I go, "Is that true?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I go, "Nick, did you hit him?" And the mom's like smiling. Okay, Dad's going to lay the law here. And I go, "Nick, did you hit him?" He goes, "Yeah." I go, "Did you hit him with open hand or fist? Because remember, I told you, always open hand so you don't injure your hand." Right? And the mother's like looking at me like, "What?" I could teach your kid not to steal. Walked out of the room, and they didn't like that. I wasn't very popular, but I thought it was cool. Mickey, what do you got for us?
First off, Benjamin, I said I didn't like sheepdog, and I see it's on your shirt, so I apologize. What I meant by that is I hear people throw that around without the context or the deep thought to what that actually means. So I meant no insult to you.
Hey, brother, it's fine, because if you read it, this is actually the charity that works for PTSD in military and law enforcement.
Perfect. I just want to make sure you didn't think.
No. Yeah.
He already texted me going, "What a dick Mickey was."
I'm honored that you asked me to be on, Tone. It was great to meet all of you men via our video chat here. I agree with everything you guys said. Aaron, all of your points are the basis of what my course is about. I don't care about the weapon if the person themselves is not proliferating good, because what is the point of a long, full life if we are assholes? What is the point of a long life if it's filled with hate, anger, all that terrible negative stuff? So we put out a video this week offering free training to teachers. And every course I do this year, we're giving away a couple spots. And our course is not just guns, but in doing that, I'm sure other people outside of my area of influence have been doing that. I've had like 10 other folks basically just mirror what I put out. And I've got several hundred people that have emailed us looking for this training. I'm not going to be able to service all of them just financially. I can't give away that much training time. So what I'm doing is, and I'm going to extend this to any of you, I'm making a database of people that will at least take some of these people. And I'm not allowing anybody that says, give me free training. I've had them send me an email. Why can't you pay to come to the training? You know, what's the deal? We're going to vet, probably end up with 1,000 people or more in 48 hours. I'm up to about 200 that have emailed. So if that's something any of you guys are interested in putting your name on that list, just get a hold of me. Carry Trainer on Instagram is the easiest way to remember to send a message to me. So thank you.
I will. Thank you, Mickey. And what I'll do, guys, when I post this, I'll post your websites and stuff online. But hey, this was a lot of fun. I'm hoping that people listening to this, the biggest message here was something I think we all said, but Aaron's, as much as I hate to give Aaron any credit or any spotlight, but he is the shortest of all of us, so doesn't get as much sunlight as the rest of us, is that, you know, amidst all we can focus on all the doom and destruction, but at the end of the day, if that's coming, we need to be as fucking strong as we can be. And if we take care of ourselves and we continue to train and remember the don't be a pussy slogan, train our family, train our kids, inspire our neighbors, you just get stronger. It really is our be your own bodyguard motto. At the end of the day, you're the first responder in your fight, and violence doesn't care what martial art you study. So I will sign off, guys. Thank you all very much. I'll be posting this today and tagging you all, and we will see you possibly on a future call. This was fun.
Thank you.
Be safe, guys. Take care.
Right.
Bye.
See ya.